Hi, today I have the Hubsan H502T. This is their GPS X4 Star drone. This is a fairly new model, and it's a nice little flyer. I won't be able to share any outdoor footage with you for the review. I'll do some indoor flying, just kind of hover it and move around the room a little bit just to show you. It is fairly stable and easy to fly inside. Again, it's a GPS flyer, so it's more suited for outside. You can fly it inside though. If you do fly it inside, I recommend that you put prop guards on it. I do not have the prop guards on this one, but I feel safe enough in my flying abilities to fly it in the house without crashing it into things. But if you do fly it in the house and crash it into things, you risk breaking the props and breaking the things that you hit. So keep that in mind and just put yourself some prop guards on there if you're flying it indoors. And you want to have a larger space because without the GPS being indoors, it will kind of drift and be looking for that satellite position to lock in on. So let's just go over a few things with this model. And again, it's the Hubsan H502T. It's equipped with a 720p camera, and the quality of this camera is not too bad. For a 720p quality, it's actually pretty good. Hubsan does a good job with their 720p cameras, in my opinion. Again, it's a GPS drone and has altitude mode and automatic return to home, which is two functions. You can select return to home on the transmitter and have it return back to the transmitter, or if your battery is low, it'll kick in a failsafe to return to home. At that point, it'll return to its original takeoff point. So if you've started flying this drone and you've walked away from your takeoff point, it's still going to land in that takeoff point on a low battery. So that's just a failsafe. That's very good to have. You do want to make sure you acquire at least 6 satellites before you arm the motors, because it will record your home point, and it will not do that accurately unless you have 6+ satellites. Generally, these things get about 11 or 12 satellites, and the more satellites you have, the more stability you have in keeping the GPS positioning. It comes with the battery, which is LiPo, and it's encased in this little plastic frame. That is a 7.4 volt 450 mAh LiPo battery, and with that battery you get 7 to 10 minutes flight time, which is pretty good. And again, I already said it weighs in at 700 grams. It's a fairly decent size for the 502 model. They have several 502 models that range in about the same size. I think this is a very good, comfortable size. I think if you go wing to wing, it's 18 inches, and then your width in front to back is about 5 inches. Just to show you, one thing it does not come with is an SD card. But right underneath here on the belly, you have a slot for an SD card. You want to get yourself a Class 10 SD card. Your better quality is going to be with a Class 10. For this drone, I think 8 gigabytes is a good card. But you slide it in the belly right there, push it all the way in, and that's where your card goes. Your battery just goes into the back, with the words Hubsan reading up, and you have notches that go in these tracks. You just slide it in, and snap it. From there, you have a power button, and you just press that power button and hold it until the lights come on your lampshades, your LEDs, and you're ready to do your calibrations and fly. With it comes your manual, which we'll get into later. 4 props are mounted on it, and it comes with an additional 4 props. It also comes with a screwdriver to install your props and to remove them. And you get this little simple battery charger, which your battery plugs in here, and you plug this into a USB and charge it. It has a red light that flashes and goes solid when it's charged. And here is your transmitter. Very simple basic transmitter with your on and off and your trim tabs. You have 3 trim tabs. On the face of it here you have picture. You simply press to take a picture and you hold to take video. And then here you have return to home. You press that to return to home. By pressing and holding it, you return to home. That's about it for the transmitter, but I want to point out some important notes here. Its GPS switch, GPS positioning works only when GPS signal has no less than 6 satellites. So again, you want to make sure you have the 6 satellites. They're written here in red, and that's important information. Do not fly it with less than 6 satellites unless you're flying indoors in a large territory. And then your home point's recorded when the motors are armed with no less than 6 satellites. So as I explained earlier, you want to have the 6 satellites for your functions to work correctly. That's the most important information that you'll find on the transmitter when you purchase it and take it out of the box. A couple other things I want to go over real quick are is in the manual, and if you go through your manual briefly, and I highly recommend you read this manual because there is important information in there. If you want to enjoy this quad, then it's very key that you open up this manual, and you'll be able to fly that quad and enjoy it. First thing it does is, one of the very important things is, it just tells you how to do your compass calibration. So when you turn this on and bind it to your transmitter, it's going to ask you to do a compass calibration. Your lights are going to blink in a rotating circular method, and you're just going to turn the quad slowly like this until those lights turn to a left to right, front to back type flashing. Then you're going to turn it nose down, clockwise turning it nice and slow, and then all your LEDs go solid. Once you've done that, that means the compass calibration is complete. So that's how you do the compass calibration roughly. Then it just gives you some important safety notes that you can browse through. And another little important section in the manual is your quadcopter motor LED indicators. So your LEDs under these lampshades have different colors and different flashing and different methods that they pop up. So for instance, power on, 4 LEDs indicators blink simultaneously every 1 to 5 seconds. This basically just tells you what each color light means. So if you have a low battery and you have red lights, you'll understand by reading all this exactly what that is trying to tell you. All the lights are trying to tell you something. So if you learn those, you'll understand what your quad is doing. And then it just tells you about installing the battery and charging, how to put your props on, flight environment. Here's where you get into the really important stuff, binding. Read this, and this will teach you how to bind this controller to the quad, and then how to arm and disarm your motors, which is basically pulling the sticks to the bottom outside corners and holding till the motors turn on. And your basic flight operation that tells you what each stick does in mode 1 and mode 2. If you're a mode 2 flyer, which most are, your left stick is your throttle. If you put it into mode 1, everything becomes reversed and this becomes your throttle. So that's told in here. This tells you your video and photo, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then your GPS position home point functions, that's a good one to read up on as well. And then your return to home mode, it explains your fail-safe mode and the conditions which activate the fail-safe. And then you have your normal and expert modes. That's another nice thing about this. You have a normal mode, and doesn't say on here what percentage those are. Usually it's like 60%, I think. But on normal mode, basically the motors are a little bit slower, controls a little bit slower. And then you get into expert mode and it kicks up your RPM, your throttle a little bit to the motors, and allows you to fly faster. The functions are a lot more faster. So you might want to just, if this is first time for you, start out in normal mode, which is the default. And then by going and pressing the right stick, just press it down, it'll click, and hold it. On your display you'll see expert mode. But again, by default, every time you start up, it'll be in normal mode, and then you have to press that stick to make it go into expert mode. So that gives you a little bit of explanation as to normal mode and expert mode, and some key points of your transmitter display, what everything means. And installing your batteries in the transmitter, very simple. And then here we go into the compass calibration again. This teaches you how to manually initiate the compass calibration by doing stick commands. And then you have, very important, when you get this and you take it out of the box and you have your battery charged up and you're ready to fly, the very first thing I recommend you do is put it on a flat, level surface and do this horizontal calibration. What that horizontal calibration is basically it calibrates your IMU or your gyro, and it resets all the values to 0. So if you've had a crash or if you've done any type of firmware update or anything, you want to make sure you do that gyro calibration or horizontal calibration, as it says in the manual. And also make a habit of doing it periodically. When you're flying and you have, say, 11 or 12 satellites and you notice it still wants to drift during flight, you want to do that calibration, and that will help you tremendously. So many people have problems with the way these fly, and all it takes is a quick 5-second calibration. And to do that calibration, all you're doing is, when you have it powered up, you're putting it on a level, flat surface. So when it resets to 0, it does that on a level playing field. And then you're going to just hold your stick over here and toggle the right stick left and right, left and right. Once you've done that, you'll see the lights on the quad flash, and once they go back to their normal mode, that calibration's done, and it literally takes seconds. So I highly recommend you do that, and you will have a much better flying experience as a result. Another really good calibration is your stick calibration for the transmitter, and that's also how you put it into mode 1 or mode 2. The most common is mode 2, and you simply hold the buttons here and turn it on, and it goes right into stick calibration mode. And once it goes into stick calibration mode, you're just going to move the sticks to all their full axis points by going left to right, up and down, and then hit all the edges and corners in both directions. And then you'll just simply press and hold one of the trim buttons and it'll be set for mode 2. For mode 1, what you're going to do is push both sticks out here and power it on, and then repeat exactly everything I did to calibrate the sticks. So that's about it. Those are all your calibrations and basic information you're going to get out of the manual. I can't stress enough, just please read your manual, and you'll have such a much better experience. So many people have problems with all these different model quads and GPS quads, and in the end it all turns out, it all ends up being simple little calibrations. It doesn't fly well, it's not easy to control. It's a calibration. Many times, like I've said, that's the case. So if you read your manual and do all these calibrations, basically you're just dialing everything in and fine-tuning your drone, and you'll get a much better flight as a result, and you'll be much happier with it. So that's basically everything in a nutshell. And excuse me. And next I'm gonna just give it a quick little flight in the house. Again, the weather outside is not good, so with the wind I'm not going to go out there and fly it because it's just going to be all over the place, and it's hard to see anyhow. So I'm gonna just fly it in the house, just do a little hover, and then just fly it forward and backward a little bit in a few turns, and keep the video short and simple, and just give you an idea of how it flies in the house. So that's about it. I think I've covered everything. Yeah, that's covering it all. So enjoy the quick little video clip, and you can get this H502T. I got mine on Amazon for $60 through Miffley Drone, and actually I got mine as a promo at a discounted rate, but the normal rate is $60, and it comes with everything I've shown you. And I do recommend Miffley Drone. I think it's Miffley or MyFly, MIFLY. They're on Amazon. They sell a lot of Hubsan models. This is a newer model, and I think you'll enjoy it. I do recommend this model, and also for beginners, this is a very good model if you want to get into the GPS flyers. So check Miffley or MyFly drone out on Amazon, and also if you buy one, I recommend you join a Facebook group that supports this model or other Hubsan models, and if you ever need any help and support, that's usually the best source from other pilots to get the information you need if you do have any problems with the quad. Also, a representative from Hubsan is usually in all of those groups, and she's very helpful, and she can also help you sort out your problems. Oh, one thing I wanted to quickly point out, I did not mention, is it has this little micro USB port in the side. That is not your charging port. That is for updating firmware. Do not update your firmware on these quads. Right now there's only one version of firmware, but don't update your firmware if you don't know how, or if you're not having any problems. If this thing is flying just fine, you're not having any issues related to firmware, then don't worry about it. Don't update the firmware. Only update the firmware if a representative from Hubsan tells you to update the firmware and gives you the proper link to that firmware. Just because another pilot tells you to update the firmware doesn't mean that it's necessarily what you need to do. And definitely don't trust firmware from other sources. Always get it from Hubsan. They'll give you a link to it, you'll download it, and they'll give you instructions on how to update the firmware. So that's just my quick stress point on updating firmware. You don't want to go and mess up your drone by putting in the wrong firmware or putting in firmware that just isn't needed when it was already flying good. So don't be the type of person that just has to have the latest update, and you'll be very happy. All right, so now I'm going to fly it and just do, again, a quick little indoor flight and just show you its indoor ability anyhow. And I hope you enjoyed this review. Click if it was helpful in the Amazon review, just click helpful. And if you're watching this as a YouTube subscriber, just please click like. Feel free to comment. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks. Bye.